Our other top story this half hour is in New York City, where captured Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro is set to face a federal judge in a couple of hours. This comes after the U.S. captured him in a surprise attack over the weekend. Maduro and his wife are charged in the U.S. with narcoterrorism, conspiracy, cocaine importation, more conspiracy charges, and weapons charges. Alice Barr has the latest from Washington.
Hi there. President Trump has been ramping up the pressure on Venezuela for weeks, and now many Democratic lawmakers are accusing the administration of misleading them about their ultimate goal, with lawmakers in both parties pushing for answers about what comes next. This morning, as deposed Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro prepares for his first court appearance in New York, charged with narco-terrorism conspiracy, President Trump again asserting the U.S. is in charge in Venezuela.
We're going to run it, fix it. We'll have elections at the right time. But the main thing you have to fix is a broken country.
That amid new details about the U.S. mission to capture Maduro and his wife and key advisor Celia Flores at their Venezuelan compound, including strikes from 150 American aircraft after a secret CIA team laid the groundwork for months. President Trump saying the country's interim president, a close Maduro ally, is now cooperating and must continue to.
If they don't behave, we will do a second strike.
The president saying American oil companies will go in to rebuild infrastructure and take over Venezuela's rich oil supply.
They're going to take the oil out of the ground, and we're taking back what they stole. Remember, they stole our property.
On a divided Capitol Hill, Democrats saying the administration should have asked for congressional authorization to strike.
Only Congress has the power to declare war.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio pushing back.
This was not an action that required congressional approval. In fact, it couldn't require congressional approval because this was not an invasion.
As Republicans defend the move.
Thank you, President Trump, for taking the action to protect American lives, to protect American interests.
And many Venezuelans who fled the country's authoritarian rule hope for a better future. Secretary Rubio argued the U.S. is at war with drug trafficking operations, not Venezuela, as President Trump suggested neighboring Colombia could be next. The top 8 congressional leaders are due for a classified briefing today, according to 4 sources, with lawmakers in both parties pressing for more information for all of Congress. In Washington, I'm Alice Barr. Back to you.
And as you heard Alice talking about, President Trump is vowing to tap into Venezuela's oil reserve. He wants American oil firms to put billions of dollars into Venezuela, which has the largest crude oil reserves on the planet. He said U.S. companies will fix Venezuela's badly broken oil infrastructure, but that fix could be cost prohibitive. Right now, we are joined by Professor Michael Greiner. He is a professor over at Oakland University. Thank you so much for coming here this morning. Can you kind of paint a picture for us to better understand maybe just the oil and the economic part of this, because there's 1,300 conversations we could have. But in terms of the oil, first of all, that has its own economy of its own.
It does, yes. You know, the price of oil is set on a global market. And I think it's worth noting that right now, the price of oil is at a historic low, okay? When you look at it on a real basis, you know, when you kind of factor in inflation, it's actually at a lower price now than just about any time in the past. And in fact, the price of oil now is so low that the sanctions we imposed on Russia don't even apply because of the fact that we're below the price that we'd essentially set on Russian oil. So there's kind of this myth out there that the solution to everything is, oh, we get more oil and suddenly, you know, prices are going to go down and everything's going to work out. The problem that we have here is, though, there is this economic dance that needs to happen. And what it is that businesses need to be able to provide a return on investment to their shareholders. You know, that's just the way the system works, sure, like it or not. And to be able to do that, they need to be able to tap into the price of oil. And, you know, sometimes, you know, all of us who are drivers here, you know, probably both of us and everybody who's watching, appreciate the fact that the price of oil is low right now. But we also forget the fact that the United States is the world's largest producer of oil. And so, a lot of our economy depends on the fact that these companies are able to make a profit from selling oil. And the fact that the prices are so low makes it hard for them to get a return on investment. So to say suddenly, oh, we want you to engage in billions of dollars of investment, which is really what it's going to take to try to bring Venezuela's oil production back to what it was in the past, is really a big ask for companies where they're not going to be able to then turn to the markets and expect they're going to be able to get this windfall to return to their shareholders.
And I know the numbers are all over the place, but I read somewhere between $60 and $80 billion of infrastructure improvements, which for oil companies, probably even oil companies, is a lot of money.
Oh, it is. It's enormous. And, the whole reason that Venezuela is in this situation where right now they're basically producing a quarter of the oil that they were producing just 20, 30 years ago. And the reason for that is basically that you need to constantly be investing in the infrastructure. It's just like a road. If you don't repair a road over time, it's going to start to break up.
We know all about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can imagine how that's been happening over 20 years or 30 years of using this infrastructure for oil. And just the technology has advanced a lot over that period of time. And the Venezuelans haven't been making those investments over time. So it's going to take an enormous amount of money just to bring it up to current standards. And that's really what we're talking about here. But again, we're talking about it within the context of oil prices are very low. And, we're even thinking, just say, for example, that we were to settle the war in Ukraine, which would be a wonderful accomplishment. But, there is a certain segment of the population out there who are looking at that and thinking to themselves, now, wait a minute, that means that all of a sudden Russia, which is, I think, the world's third largest producer of oil, would suddenly be able to bring their oil onto the global market, which would then make it so prices come down even more. We have to remember that pesky old supply and demand curve, which means if you've got if you've got more supply with set level of demand or decreasing demand, then you're going to see prices go down.
So let's look at it backwards then. If, let's say, the Trump administration were to convince oil companies, the producers, to invest into Venezuelan infrastructure, and they are looking at their bottom line, at their ROI, could we see our prices increase to offset those costs?
That's certainly possible. The problem with that, and you make a good point here, but the problem with that theory is just the fact that it is set on a global market. So yes, the United States, yeah, exactly. They could come in and say, okay, we're going to try to raise prices, but we're not the only ones who have a say in that. The Saudis also have a say in that. The Russians, again, if sanctions are raised, then they have a say in it. The Nigerians, the Mexicans, the Canadians. You look at it, this is a global market where the United States is really, even though we're the world's largest producer, we're still only about, 20% of global production. So we don't really have the ability to control prices the way that the companies might like to.
So if the infrastructure isn't there or isn't up to date, what do we do then with Venezuela's massive reserves? Because they are number one in terms of reserves.
They are number one in terms of reserves. But it's also worth noting, by the way, that there are different kinds of oil. And this is really where it starts to get even beyond my expertise as a business professor. And it's that the kind of oil that they have in Venezuela is actually very different from the kind of oil we have in the United States. So it's not like we can just ship the oil from Venezuela to the United States and process it here. There are special refineries in Venezuela that need to be used to process the oil there, and they actually pollute quite a bit and are quite expensive to operate. So it's not like there's just this quick fix that we can kind of substitute one for the other. It would actually require quite a bit of work to kind of bring them in to the global oil economy.
Yeah. Okay, Professor Michael Greiner, OU, thank you so much for your insight. We really appreciate that.
Great to be here.